All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm cutting some blocks because we have a rim joist on one side of the project here, and we have cantilevering joists. So in between these joists, we have to put blocks to keep them from twisting. So since our layout is 16 inches, take 1.5 inches away from that, so it's 14.5. But we take a smidgen more, so generally we do 14 and 7/16. So we make a mark at 14 7/16 and we cut a bunch of blocks, and we have those on hand, so as we're laying joist after joist after joist, we can tie the blocks in as we go. So here I've marked it 14 and 7/16. Making sure that my block will fall away when I cut it, and I don't want any binding, so I hold it on this side and cut it on this side. All right, I'll count out how many I need, and I'll cut those out, and then we'll lay the joists. I'm going to start at the far end, so I've measured from the inside of my rim joist to my first line. Now, if the X is on the far side of that line, you'd have to take 1.5 inches off. But since my X is on this side of my line, and my rim joist is here, I measure to that line, and that's 5 5/8. So my first joist, since my layout started on this side and went all the way down there, I have a smaller area between my rim joist and the first joist in the far end. Hope this isn't confusing you. But the bottom line is, since I'm starting at the far end, I've just measured what I need to get on layout. Put that small block in there, and then I'll put in my first joist, and then I'll be on layout, and we can just come right back to our starting layout. If you want, you can start on the beginning of layout, which is probably simpler. I'm just doing it because it's easier to see when I'm down there. But you can start on layout and just keep going and going and going. Now bear in mind, here's a note that on your layout, on your first joist that you're running, you'll have your basically your first joist will be kind of like a rim joist, and then your second joist will be cut. That distance will be a little bit shorter, say 3/4 of an inch shorter, because on layout well, it just will. I don't have to get into it too much. So don't when you cut your first block to your first joist, don't get all worried that it's not 14.5 inches. It will be a little bit shorter based that you are starting from 0 and getting to the first center line. Every other joist will be edge to edge to edge to edge, or center to center to center, but on the very first one it's outside to center, so it does change the first measurement. The very first layout is outside to center of joist, and center to joist, and center to joist. All right, we're down here at the end, and we put our tape measure down, and it's just a tad over 5 5/8. So it's 5 11/16. So what we'll do is we'll cut one that's 5 11/16, and then we'll get back in here and we'll put in our next block in, which will be on layout, and continue on. But I want to show you over at the beginning that point that I just mentioned about when you put your first joist in, this is a rim joist, to your second joist, and what the measurement will be there. You recall that when we laid this out, we came 16 inches on layout and then came back 3/4 of an inch to get our line. That gives us center line of our joist. Now you'll notice that we're at 15 1/4, and once we put our rim joist on here, that's going to take 1.5 inches, which is 14 1/4 less a half, which is 13 3/4. So that's going to be basically what your block is. So your first block is going to be much shorter, like 13 3/4, and then your second block will be right there at 14.5. It'll be 16 less 1.5 inches, which will be 14.5. So don't let that worry you that that first block is small. Everything will go good from there. Okay, naturally my first joist needs to be notched out for an anchor bolt. So we'll notch that out and we'll get back here and we'll throw that in. But while I'm here, I know that I'll notice that my block is also going to run in there. So why don't I notch out my block as well, save me a trip. When you're hitting the nail in tight quarters like this, what happens is you don't get a good full swing. And so what you want to do is just basically use your wrist and kind of relax a little bit, because the hammer wants to do the work for you. All the weight's down here and you can just let it kind of drop onto the nail. With a little bit of effort you can get quite a bit of power. Don't use your elbow. Don't try to get your whole arm into it, because you just don't have the space, and besides your elbow will wear out after a few years. The other thing to bear in mind is you want your hammer head to be right square with the nail. If it's not like this, you'll see that the nail immediately will dive off. That'll be your first clue. So people, when they're nailing, they realize, wait a minute, it's going some other way, or you know, the problem is obviously it's just the face of the hammer is just off. And usually they can get it straight pretty much this way, but this way is a little difficult. So just kind of stay in mind that the face of the hammer really needs to strike the nail flush, flat to flat. And just use your wrist, and the nail should go in for you. And that's how you nail in a tight area. All right, here we are at the far end of our project here. We have our rim joist, which is our first joist actually, and then we have our second joist. I've cut my block, and I just put it in, it may be hard for you to see, but I just drop it in there right at the edge of the mudsill. So it's just straight up and down at the mudsill. Okay, then I'm just going to get in here and toenail my joist in, tighten it up. Maybe another one. Okay, and my block's in there a little bit tighter. I want to put my square down there and make sure it's nice and straight up and down. And then I'll tie this all together. I'm putting a nail in this one because this is up a little bit and I want to drive it down. Okay. And then I will continue to nail this all off. Now this is where we get moving on to our next joist. First thing we want to do is we want to put in our first block. And what you do is you put a toenail at your block, like this. Now that sucks it right up to the other joist, okay? And leaves us just a tad over 1.5 inches. Now you're probably going to gain a little bit as you go, so being a little bit shy right here isn't a concern right now. Now I have this block to go off of because I know it's straight up and down. Put a nail in here. And then what I do is I toenail my block into here. If I had room to swing inside these joists right here, I could probably put nails at a slight angle into this block like this. But as it is, I don't have that ability. I can't get my hammer in this tight area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some toenails in. I'll do it from the inside in case any of my nails pop through a little bit. And